The van rolled in slow, the way predators do when they own the ground they're crossing. 3 vehicles, actually, blacked-out windows, sonora plates, the kind of quiet engine hum that comes with money, and the confidence that money buys in places where money is the only law that matters. They pulled to a stop outside the only diner in Reyes Flat, Arizona, and the men who climbed out did so with the particular looseness of people who have never once in their lives been held accountable for anything. 7 of them. The one who stepped out last was named Rodrigo Salazar, and he was not the biggest man in the group, but he was the one the others watched when they wanted to know how to feel about a situation. He looked at the diner. He looked at the 2 pickup trucks in the lot. He looked at the woman sitting on the bench outside the entrance, nursing a paper cup of coffee, not looking at him. She was maybe 50, dusty boots, a canvas jacket the color of sandstone, gray threading through dark hair she'd pulled back without ceremony. She looked like the town, weathered, unhurried, going nowhere interesting. Salazar smirked at her the way men like him smirk at things they've already decided don't matter. He walked past her and through the door. She didn't look up from her coffee, but she had already counted them, already cataloged the weight distribution of the one called Beto, who favored his right leg, already noted the bulge patterns, 3 with sidearms, 2 with something heavier under the left arm, 1 with a blade on the ankle. Already clocked the formation they walked in without knowing they were walking in one, and what it told her about who gave orders and who followed them, and who would panic first when things went wrong. She took a slow sip of her coffee. Before we go any further, subscribe right now and stay with me until the very last word of the story. Drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from, because what this woman does in the next hour is something you will not believe until you see it unfold. Margaret Cale had been living in Reyes Flat for 6 years. She had a house on the edge of town with a vegetable garden and a dog named Peso, and a reputation among her neighbors as someone who was quiet, reliable, and extremely good at fixing fences. She volunteered at the small library on Thursday afternoons. She drove the oldest truck in the county without apology. She did not drink, did not socialize much, did not invite questions about where she'd come from. People assumed she was retired. They were not wrong. They simply had no framework for what she was retired from. Her full name was Major Margaret Cale, United States Army, Special Forces, though she had not used the rank in 6 years and did not intend to start. She had spent 19 years doing things in desert environments that required skill sets that do not appear in any recruitment brochure and are not discussed in any room that has windows. She had worked the border corridor in an operational capacity that the Army did not officially confirm, and she had learned over 2 decades every topographic crease and thermal signature and sightline and terrain that looked empty to people who did not know how to read it. The Sonoran Desert was not empty. It never had been. It was a map, and Margaret Cale knew how to read it better than anyone alive. She had chosen Reyes Flat because it was small, and because it was quiet, and because it sat at the edge of a stretch of desert she knew like the back of her hand, and because she was tired. She had earned the tired, she had paid for it in ways she did not catalog anymore, because the cataloging served no purpose. Her mentor had told her that once. Colonel Iris Brennan, who had been the first woman to run a Special Forces intelligence cell, and who had died of a thing as ordinary and unfair as cancer 3 years after Margaret retired. Iris had said, "When the work is done, put it down. Not away. You cannot put this kind of work away, but down. Your hands need to be able to open." Margaret had tried. Some mornings she was better at it than others. The morning the Salazar cartel drove into Reyes Flat, she had been on her way to buy eggs. She heard it before she saw it. The engine note of vehicles moving in coordinated formation was a sound her nervous system recognized before her conscious mind caught up. She had been walking to her truck, and she turned and watched them come down the main road, and she set down her grocery bag on the bench outside the diner, and she sat and she waited to understand what she was looking at. It took her 4 minutes to understand she knew some of the operational signatures of the Salazar operation from her years working the corridor. She knew what it meant when they moved in threes. She knew the particular manner of a cartel column that was not passing through but had arrived somewhere intentionally. She understood, with a cold and clarifying certainty, that they were here for Diego Reyes. Diego was 73 years old and had been the mayor of Reyes Flat for 11 years, and was the great-grandson of the man the town was named after. He was also, 6 months ago, the man who had refused to allow his town's water infrastructure to be used as a transit corridor for Salazar product. He had made this refusal publicly in writing and had sent copies to 3 federal agencies, none of which had moved quickly enough. She knew about this because Diego had told her, because Diego trusted her in the quiet way that small-town people trust their reliable neighbors without understanding exactly why the trust is so solid. She finished her coffee. She stood up. She went to her truck, not the diner, and she drove home at exactly the speed limit, and she was inside her house for 11 minutes before she came back out. She had a different jacket on. She had her pack. She had the things she needed. She did not have her phone. She did not want to be located. She drove out of town on the eastern road, and then she left the road, and she went into the desert on foot, and the desert accepted her the way it always had, as something familiar, something that belonged. Inside the diner, Rodrigo Salazar ordered coffee he didn't intend to drink and sent 2 of his men down the street toward the mayor's office and told the remaining 4 to make sure nobody in the diner felt like making any phone calls. He was not concerned. This was a town of 400 people in the middle of nothing. There was no sheriff's deputy within 40 minutes, and the federal response time was longer still. He had run these calculations. He was thorough for the kind of man he was. He was also at this moment being watched from a ridge 400 meters north of the diner's roofline. Margaret had the elevation and the angle and the wind, which was coming southwest at 11 miles an hour, with a slight thermal variance in the middle distance that she adjusted for without thinking about it. She had a rangefinder, and she had the high ground, and she had 19 years of working in this specific type of terrain, and she had what Iris Brennan had called the gift and the burden of the long view, the ability to see a tactical situation in its entirety from a position of stillness and silence, and to make decisions that other people would not make because other people could not hold that much information at once without flinching. She was not making decisions about shooting anyone. She was making decisions about sequence. The 2 men Salazar had sent to the mayor's office, she tracked them on the road below. Beto, favoring the right leg, the other one, whose name she didn't know, moving with the specific alertness of someone who'd been in actual combat. She gave them a designation in her mind. She nodded their pace, their spacing, the angle they were walking relative to the office entrance. She picked up her radio, the old military band unit she kept charged out of a habit she'd never fully broken, and she made a call. Diego Reyes answered on the second ring. "Do not go to your office," she said. "Leave by the back, go to the Vasquez house, and stay there. Don't ask me questions, Diego. Just move." A pause. He knew her voice. He trusted the voice. "Moving," he said. She watched the 2 men arrive at an empty office. Then she began to move herself. What she did over the next 43 minutes would not be fully reconstructed until later, when the federal agents who eventually arrived tried to piece together the sequence from the physical evidence and the accounts of 7 very shaken men who all told variations of the same story that nobody wanted to put in a report because none of it made sense on paper. What the evidence showed was this: 7 armed men had entered a small Arizona town in coordinated formation. Within the hour, 4 of them had been located, secured, and left in positions that required their companions to cut them loose, wrists bound with the kind of knot that takes training to tie and longer to undo. The remaining 3, including Rodrigo Salazar, had been driven to the eastern edge of town by a sequence of events they described as impossible. Appearing figures, sounds from directions that made no tactical sense, a voice on a radio frequency they could not account for that gave them each time their exact position and told them calmly where not to go next, until they had been channeled like water down a slope to a single point in the road where 2 Cochise County deputies who had received an anonymous tip were waiting with their lights on. None of the 7 men had been shot. None had been seriously injured. All of them were very quiet when the deputies took them in, and at least 2 of them were shaking in a way that had nothing to do with the desert cold. Salazar said one thing to the deputy who processed him. He said, "Who is she?" Not as a question, as a thing a person says when they are trying to make something real by naming it. The deputy didn't know. In the diner, the people who had been told to stay put had, at some point in the preceding 40 minutes, simply found that the men guarding them were no longer there. They did not know when this had happened, or how. One of them, a woman named Carla, who worked the morning shift and had been a waitress for 30 years, said that the only thing she remembered was the door opening at some point and a woman in a dusty canvas jacket coming in and saying quietly that it was all right to use their phones now. By the time anyone thought to look for her, she was gone. Diego Reyes called her that evening. She let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was mostly silence. And then, "Thank you, Margaret." She was in her garden when she listened to it. The dog was beside her. The sun was going down behind the western ridge in a slow collapse of orange and red, painting the desert in colors that no one who hadn't seen it could quite believe were real. She stood there for a long time, phone in her hand, listening to the quiet. The desert gives back what it is given. Margaret Cale had given it 2 decades of her most careful attention, her most disciplined years, her sharpest and most precise self. It had taught her in return how to be invisible, how to be patient, how to see the full shape of a problem from a distance that most people could not tolerate. She had tried for 6 years to live quietly at the edge of all of that, to put it down, as Iris had said, without putting it away. Some days she thought she was managing it. Some days she was not sure it was possible. But on this evening, in this garden, with the desert going gold around her and her town 4 miles back sitting in the ordinary peace of a Tuesday dusk, she thought that maybe this was what the long training had always been for. Not the wars, not the missions, not the operations with no official names. This, the ability to stand between a place and the thing moving toward it, and say quietly without drama or announcement, "Not today. You will not come through here today. The people who do not know to be afraid will not have to learn. I still know how. I will stand here. Go around. Chin, chin, chin."